KTNA, experts in apprenticeships, traineeships and work-based training.
Hello and welcome to Chris & Co, the show looking at what affects business in Kent with me, Chris Price. Joining me this week are Frazer Thompson, Chief Executive of winemaker Chapel Down, and Sarah Calcutt, General Manager at Avalon Growers, which looks after over a dozen farms in Kent. On this week's show, we'll be looking at the future of EU subsidies for farmers after the Environment Secretary Michael Gove spoke about what he would like Britain's agricultural sector to look like post-Brexit. We'll also discuss the gender pay gap and whether business is up to the task of paying men and women fairly. First, we're heading to Tenterden, where Kent's largest wine producer, Chapel Down, has just completed a £20 million fundraising effort. We'll speak to boss Frazer Thompson in a moment about what this means for the English wine industry. First, here's Louisa Britton with the details.
Chapel Down in Tenterden is already the largest wine producer in England, but has just raised £20 million worth of investment in new shares in what bosses have called a transformational moment for the brand. Its wine is already stocked in shops such as Marks and Spencer, Waitrose and Sainsbury's across the country. But with this extra money, the company's putting itself in a position to make takeovers and expand the business.
English wine is at a really exciting stage. Everyone's planting, everyone's expanding, demand is outstripping supply. It couldn't be more exciting really for English wine, and Chapel Down is at the forefront of that. We'll be at least doubling in size over the next few years, and that brings, well, more opportunity.
But this isn't the first time the Kent Vineyard, which also grows vines in Bluebell Hill and the Weald, has raised cash, as a crowdfunding campaign in 2014 yielded £4 million and another £1.7 million in crowdfunding secured enough to pay for its brewery in Ashford, due to open this year. But where will all this money go? Well, the cash from the latest share offering will be used to buy 500 acres of new vineyard land, as well as building new stock.
We've raised this extra money, which is fantastic for the brand. It means we can invest in the vineyards, it means we can invest in the production, which means we can make more wine, because currently we can't make enough to satisfy demand. So that's great for English wine and for Chapel Down and for England as a whole.
As it seems the Tenterden headquartered firm isn't satisfied with sticking to producing wine, investment is now going into brewing beer and has also recently decided to produce a gin and vodka line.
We launched our gin and vodka late last year, and it was the result of an experiment. The Chardonnay grappa was quite smooth and quite kind of creamy on the palate, and so I thought that would lend itself to being blended into a vodka. And the Bacchus grappa was more aromatic, so we decided to use aromatics which were reminiscent of the Bacchus grape, and to create a gin that was, fresh, light and aromatic, reminiscent of our wines and our beers and our ciders, to keep that thread going through all the products.
With more than £11 million in turnover expected this financial year, it seems Chapel Down are expanding and entering a truly transformational period. This is Louisa Britton for KMTV in Tenterden.
OK, so Frazer, first of all, congratulations on raising £20 million recently. What are you going to do with the money then?
Well, it's a transformational sum. Genuinely, it's humbling, and it's fantastic news, not just for us, but the whole team at Chapel Down, but actually for the English wine industry in general. And what it means that we can do is we can plant about 500 acres of new vineyards. That's a big area. Most of that, I suspect, will be in Kent, so that's also great for Kent. It also means that about £8 million will be spent doing that. Around about £4 million will be spent bringing that right the way up to fruition, because we can plant it this year, but actually you won't see a bottle of wine for 5 years. So we've got to build the stocks over that period. And then we're building this brewery in Ashford, which is fantastic, but also we want to step on the gas on the beer. So that gives us to about £3 million extra on that. And that leaves us with another £5 million, which I think we loosely call dry powder. But dry powder is quite an exciting term for it. So, of course, there's potential for rolling up the industry, so consolidation. So I guess what you see in most wine markets all over the world is when you see a boom like this, there's a little bit of over-investment goes on, and then generally things start to consolidate a little bit.
So you're saying that you're going to be looking to take part in that consolidation?
We're always, yes. We are the market leader. It makes sense for us to participate in any consolidation that's going on if it's right for the company. But it also means that we can step on the gas on other things too. So, for example, you mentioned the gin and vodka in the report there. I mean, we put it into Majestic at the beginning of December. It sold out about 12 days later and was the third fast-moving spirit in the whole of Majestic, which is staggering right from the start. So we could really step on the gas on that as well. So very exciting.
You managed one of your investors, one of your new investors, is BlackRock. You know, one of the largest asset manager in the world. How were you able to attract investment from a company like that? And what does that say about the English wine sector?
Well, BlackRock are an amazing company. Actually, they're the biggest global investors in the world, and they are pretty humble. Actually, they don't like to be in the limelight, so I'm a little reticent about talking about them. But obviously, it's run by very smart guys, and they tend to take a long-term view on things. And wine, if nothing else, is a pretty long-term business. So what they're looking for, and what any great investor looks for in a long-term investment, is they're looking for great people, a great product, and great prospects. And really, what their investment in us meant was that it's vindicated all of those things. And it's a tremendous feeling to get that sort of plus point from somebody as big and as good and as substantial as BlackRock. But it also means, of course, that they're there when we need them. So, you know, we talk about sort of, you know, going into Sainsbury's, but frankly, I want to conquer the world. And if you want to conquer the world, you really need guys like BlackRock with you on that journey.
Sure. Lots to talk about there, but we have to move on because there's a lot to pack into the show today. Farmers breathed a sigh of relief last week as the Environment Secretary Michael Gove set out plans to keep the present EU subsidy system effectively in place as far as 2024. But he warns the system is fundamentally flawed, unjust, inefficient, and gives the most from the public purse to those who have the most private wealth. He wants farmers to do more to earn their subsidies post-Brexit, with Kent farmers calling for more details on this. Cameron Tucker reports.
5 months after the National Trust said the countryside faced damaging uncertainty in the wake of Brexit, farmers have received welcome news from the Environment Secretary. In a series of conferences, Michael Gove announced the government will maintain the £3 billion worth of annual subsidies for farmers until 2024, the same level they've received from the EU. That's a 2-year extension on what the government had previously indicated.
By giving an extra 2-year window, we've now got 5 years where we can actually plan. There's been a lot of talk amongst the farmers about lack of investment and an unwillingness to invest in new machinery, new technology, because the subsidy is very important for farming. By now being able to plan for 5 years, and then once the paper comes out and we know what the new rules will be, it will also give us time to adapt for them. So I think it does give more security.
As part of the 2-year extension, farmers will be rewarded for schemes such as planting wildflower meadows and woods, a move seen as beneficial for the environment but has potential to undermine food production.
The thing that we've got to be careful of is that the initiatives that come in keep us on a level playing field with the rest of the world as far as the cost of producing a crop is concerned. There's certain chemicals, there's certain practices, and we want to make sure that the whole world follows them so that our crop is as competitive as China, America, South America.
It's also been suggested the extra couple of years further indicates the government's lack of a post-Brexit plan. Paul Cobb from the Farming and Wildlife Advisory Group suggests there does need to be more clarity in the transition phase from Mr Gove.
He talks about natural capital and ecosystem services and so on. I think we definitely need to see some more flesh on the bones of that, because that you know, we don't know how farmers would be, what farmers would provide in that sort of scheme and how they would be supported. There needs to be a lot more detail on that, and I think we shouldn't just let the running be done by, if you like, the usual environmental organisations. I think farmers themselves need to get together in farming organisations and say, okay, this is what we can provide in the way of public goods, and this is the support that we would need to do that.
Further details regarding the government's agricultural plans will be released this spring. Cameron Tucker for KMTV.
Okay, so it's a very complex situation, but overall, are farmers happy or unhappy about Mr Gove's comments about the future of subsidies for the sector?
I think in the main, people are going to be happy about this one. It's a massive amount of change. People are quite resistant to change, but the Common Agricultural Policy was written to fit all farmers across Europe, and it isn't a model that particularly fits Britain. And we've been trying to find ways to make us fit, to see what we can draw down. Our government have opted us out over time, over different programmes. So it's very different. What happens here has been different to the rest of Europe the whole way through. An opportunity to write something that suits our businesses and suits our environment, but also then will benefit consumers, has got to be good.
Is Mr Gove right in saying that the current cap system is unjust and rewards farmers for the amount of land that they own?
Because it is an area payment, it is entirely linked to what you own. So in that case, yes, it is unjust. You do have to do certain things to qualify for this. There's lots of things that you can and cannot do. And we're also back to the one size fits all. It doesn't fit the UK, because if it fits somebody in Lithuania who farms under a hectare, actually if you're forming broad, large crops on Romney Marsh, there's no comparison between the two, but it's actually holding back technology, holding back crops, because if you want the money, you've got to qualify doing something that ticks the box.
Is he right with the principle of saying public money for public goods, so encouraging farmers to invest in woodland and wildlife habitats in return for getting money from the government?
Absolutely, but it has to be balanced also with being able to produce crops to feed the British population. There's a very strong movement. Look at the investment in Frazer's business. We want British product, we want British food. If we're going to become a nation that has to farm woodland, which doesn't then have a product that people can eat or drink, there's got to be a balance between the two. Okay. Thanks very much for your thoughts on that. We're going to have to move on now. We'll see you just shortly, right after this short break. Welcome back to Chris & Co, the show looking at what affects business in Kent, where I'm joined by Frazer Thompson of Chapel Down and Sarah Calcutt from Avalon Growers. The gender pay gap has been thrown into the spotlight this week with the resignation of BBC China editor Carrie Gracie over pay inequality. For the first time, a number of Kent firms have voluntarily reported the difference between what they pay men and women and who works in high-ranking roles. Poppy Jeffrey has the details.
It's been revealed that women are still being paid a lot less than men at a number of companies across the county. The gender pay gap has been in the spotlight recently with the high-profile resignation of BBC China editor Carrie Gracie, who cited inequality with male colleagues. From last year, organisations with 250 or more employees have had to publish figures showing the difference over how much they pay both men and women. So far, 527 companies have submitted their figures to the government website, with 7 of these being based in Kent. So what does the picture look like for women working in the county? For all these figures, we're going to be talking about the average difference in pay for men and women compared. One of the worst pictures is at Tunbridge and Malling Borough Council, with women being paid on average 23.9% less than men. Despite this, though, at the top level of earnings, it's pretty evenly split, with 56.3% men and 43.7% women. It's a stark contrast in the lowest paid quarter of employees, as 81% of them are women. Moving across the county now, and Maidstone Borough Council has said that on average, women are paid 5.4% less than their male counterparts. Only 37.9% of the top quarter of paid employees are women. And the University of Kent, though, also pays women significantly less, with them receiving on average a 17.5% less. It's published a statement on its website explaining how it's working to close the gender pay gap, though, and says it's already reduced it by nearly 5% since 2008. There are places where it looks more positive, though, with the Royal British Legion in Aylesford, for example. Although it pays women 7.3% lower on average, the majority of the highest paid positions are filled with women, 63% of them. And women who do get bonus pay get a whopping 159% more than men. Other companies who have declared their pay gaps include the Village Academy in Canterbury, which on average pays women 22.3% less, Europa Logistics in Dartford, which pays women 19% less, and Avante Care in Faversham with 18.2% less. But do you think it's fair where you work? Do you think women should get paid less than men? Get in touch by using the hashtag KentSays on Twitter.
OK, a real big topic this week. Frazer, is there a gender pay gap in your firm?
Yes, I'm afraid there is. And we're going to try and do something about it. The simple truth is that most of the senior management of the company are male. And that's the way we've developed as an entrepreneurial company. But most of our consumers, about half of our consumers are female. And actually a lot of the talent that we've got coming through the organisation is female. But if you ask me, are the men paid as much as the women? No, the women are paid underpaid. And we've got to do something about it. And in fact, that starts right at the top. So we've started to appoint a very bright woman to our board, but actually she's still too outnumbered. So we do need to do something about that, not just about the women gender pay gap, but also ethnicity is badly represented in our company. And we know we've got to do something about that. And, if we want to conquer the world, that's what we're going to have to do, because middle-aged, bald white guys are not the solution. And unfortunately, that's what I am.
I think it's a very difficult situation. I mean, it's very difficult to actually. It's one thing identifying the problem, but another thing to address it. How do you go about addressing it? Is there a way to address this in a good way?
I think we have to look at experience and skills, qualification, and you have to look at whether you can justify it. I really struggle to find where you could justify jobs having a differential in pay if somebody's qualified and capable. If you're running a proper HR structure, you're going to appraise them, so you'll know whether they're good at their job and they're delivering what they say. Well, in your instance, and someone who's assisting moving the company forward, there is no justification. But we have inherited lots of systems because you have issues. Women have to stop work when they have their children, and you have to renegotiate your position when you return into the workplace. And I think maybe that negotiating skill also comes into it for this as well.
Is it right that companies that have more than 250 employees are now being told that they will have to report details of their gender pay gap? Is that the way to...
Well, the reporting is quite confusing, or it can appear to be quite confusing. The most important thing, I think, for any woman, and I'll speak on behalf of people I'm not, but the most important thing is they feel they're going to be treated fairly when they join that organisation, that they've got every opportunity for advancement, that actually they were given a fair rap when they got the job, that they're not going to be underpaid versus the male candidate for that job, and that they've got career progression opportunities that are exactly the same. Now, if those are possible things to do, then I think we start to close the gender pay gap. Unfortunately, the fact of life is that people will have to take pregnant pauses to have families, but you've got to accommodate that. We need good, talented women in our business, and we've got to find them, and we've got to give them a fair rap as a career.
Is positive discrimination the way to fix this issue? Having quotas for the number of people on your board or in your workplace of a certain gender or ethnicity, for example.
It's very difficult, isn't it? Because if you say you're going to have a quota, then you leave your appointee open to, well, she wasn't quite up to it, but we have to have one, so we'll have her. That's not it. You should be appointing people on for the benefit of their qualification. So I'm not sure that quota is good, but actually, if there is a situation where it comes down to one or the other, you should be really certain you've got the right person.
It's the leadership of the organisation needs to understand. If the leadership of the organisation doesn't believe in gender equality and the right amount of ethnicity in the organisation, then it won't happen. And actually, the story needs to be told of how important it is to get a gender balance, but also an ethnicity balance in your organisation, and to see examples, good examples of where that's working, rather than it feeling forced. Then it will happen. I'm sure it will happen. But it's the leadership of those organisations that needs to grasp that first. You can't just go to a recruiting manager and say, I want to make sure there's a girl in this position, or I want to make sure there's an ethnic person in this position. It just won't work that way. The leaders have to take views, and then perhaps there's a role for positive discrimination.
Thanks very much for that, guys. Really, really big issue there. Moving on now, with news of flourishing freight traffic on ferries, apprehension over an attraction, and a night spot losing its licence, here's Josie Hannett with this week's Business Roundup.
The boss of the largest port in Kent has signalled the need for a Brexit deal which keeps trade flowing between the UK and the EU after revealing record freight traffic figures. The Port of Dover handled more than 2.6 million lorries last year, up nearly 10,000 on 2016, and the fifth straight year when it's broken its record. As Europe's biggest ferry port, it handles up to 17% of the UK's entire trade in goods, thought to be worth up to £122 billion annually. Chief Executive Tim Waggett said this is proof that Dover continues to be the port of choice for hauliers travelling to and from Europe, the UK's largest trading partner.
A popular manor house and gardens has delayed its reopening by 3 months. On New Year's Eve, Groombridge Place told Facebook followers it was due to reopen on the 2nd of January. But on Sunday, a post on its Facebook page said the Grade 1 listed property was closed for the remainder of the winter season. So far, Groombridge Place has not responded to questions over refunds for members with annual tickets. And the owner of a popular bar in Canterbury says he will fight to keep his licence after he was accused of flouting regulations. Police say IDs aren't being checked on the door of Club Burrito, too many people are being allowed in, and that the bar doesn't have a sound limiter. The bar's owners denied the claims and says he has CCTV to prove otherwise. A review of Club Burrito's licence is set to take place next month.
Okay, so we've got some news there of the Port of Dover, record freight traffic for the 5th straight year. But is its prosperity dependent on us getting that good Brexit trade deal that Tim Waggett, the chief executive, said he's hoping for?
Well, it might be. It's great news, by the way, for Dover. So it's well done to the whole team there for doing that. I don't know whether we don't know what's going to happen on the Brexit deal. What we do know is that the infrastructure that supports Dover is not increasingly fit for purpose, and that we do need to do something about a lower Thames crossing, which we know is happening, but we do need to do something about the M20 and the M2 and the A2 and the connectivity across Kent. Those are infrastructure projects that demand vision that would support Dover at some point in the future. So I think it's great news, but we need the infrastructure too, please.
Sure. How much are businesses concerned about customs arrangements? This is, a subject that's coming up more and more, and we need goods to be flowing at the pace that they need.
And it's a flow two ways. So for the farming industry, we're very reliant on tree materials. So my guys buy most of, 98% of the trees come from abroad. So there's a lot of looking at whether we can invest in that sort of infrastructure in the UK, whether we need some propagation centres within the UK and reinvigorate that industry. It's a big challenge. A lot of the products that we use to help us grow, packaging, all those sorts of things, that is all coming from abroad as well. So there's a big concern about how trade will be moving and whether there's going to be additional cost within that. Would
the food sector in this country function in the way that it needs to if there isn't this, the Brexit trade deal and customs arrangements?
I think we will have big problems. Yeah. I think consumers will notice it because the value of the cost of things that they have become accustomed to buying 12 months of the year will change.
All right, thanks for that, Sarah. But before we go, we just have time to reveal our number of the week. And this week's number is 7. Figures from the Office for National Statistics show the UK's manufacturing output grew for the 7th straight month in November. Total production increased 0.4% compared with October, with manufacturing output up 3.9% compared to the same time last year. The weaker value of the pound has been credited for the boom. Unfortunately, guys, we don't have time to talk about that, but it's been great having you both on the show. Thanks very much for coming in. That is it for the latest edition of Chris & Co, our show looking at the issues affecting business in Kent. Keep up to date with the county's latest business news at kentbusiness.co.uk. But for now, thanks very much for watching. Bye-bye.
KTNA, experts in apprenticeships, traineeships and work-based training.